Hi, shalom friends. It has been said that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Well, obviously, you have to know where you're going before you set out on the journey, otherwise you'll still be walking. And the 1,000 miles might turn out to be endless 1,000 miles. So we can equally say that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a destination. Without a destination, you don't have a journey. So let's coin a new phrase. Every beginning begins with an end. If there's no end, then there's really no beginning. In the mystical tradition, there's actually a teaching which says no otz tchilasan besofan betchilasan, which loosely translated means the end is wedged in the beginning, and the beginning is wedged in the end. For example, what happens if you want to build a house? In fact, you have a dream house or a vision of a house. So you have this vision, and then you buy the land, you survey the land, and you hire the architects and the contractors, and you get the permits, and so on and so forth, until 10 years later, your home is standing. And when you walk in for the first time, or you have your first night's sleep there, your dream that had begun 10 years earlier finally comes into fruition. It's the end that proves your vision, or that testifies to your vision, to your dream. The end actually creates that the beginning was true. And clearly, if you didn't have a end in sight, you wouldn't know where to build, how to build, what to build, and so on. So every beginning has to have a sense of where does it end, and when we actually end, that strengthens the original beginning. In fact, we could go even deeper. It's not merely that there's an association between the beginning and the end, but actually the end of something makes the beginning of something worthy. Let's look at the beginning of the Chumash. We're taught God created the world in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. And of course, even a child would ask, well, if he was tired at the end of the 6 days, why didn't he take a little snack or a little coffee break on day number 3? So then he wouldn't have had to be so tired. Or why did he have to do it in 6 days? If he would have done it in a month, would he have had to rest because he... So it's silly. God is not tired, so then why did he have to rest? And again, why do we have to know that? If the concept is that God created man to be productive and to work and to preserve the beautiful creation that he made, it would be suffice to say God created the world in 6 days, and now he says, go out and emulate me, or go out and preserve what I have created. What is this idea of he rested, or he ceased to work? So of course, the very simplicity forces us to say as follows. There's a purpose of the 6 days of the week. The 6 days of the week actually lead to the Shabbat. It's not an issue of being tired. Rather, there are 2 ways in which the divinity chooses to reveal himself. One is through 6 days of action, and then there's a higher level where the divinity is revealed through non-action. So when we're told that we should keep the Shabbat is not the end of a week. In other words, productivity is Sunday through Friday. And then when we have nothing more to produce, I guess we have a day off and we do nothing. On the contrary, it's actually 6 steps to get to where you want to go. Your goal is the Shabbat. Your goal is to be tranquil with God, serene with God, actually at peace with the world, Shabbat Shalom, a peacefulness, a wholesomeness, a completeness. But you will not get it on its own. You cannot wake up Sunday morning and feel that it's Shabbos. You have to work towards the goal of Shabbos. So every Sunday begins with a count upwards towards Shabbat, and every Shabbat gives a completeness to the week that passed. There's much more to discuss about the 6 days of the week and the Shabbat. I merely inserted it in this YouTube to further emphasize this concept of beginning and end. It's not, well, when you finish, that is the end. So automatically what you started was the beginning, but on the contrary, the beginning has to be focused towards the end, because the end and the beginning are, in a sense, two sides of the same coin. Now, if this is true about every mission that we undertake and every project that we do, let's expand this and think for a moment about the generations of Jewish people. I don't know how many generations, if this meant 30 generations or 40 generations or 100 generations. But it would be fair to suggest that the first generation of Jews, whether we start from the family of Abraham or whether we start from the nation of Sinai, that's the beginning. But the beginning of Sinai, or even the greatness of Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, that can only be exemplified or demonstrated by the last generation. I'm sure we've all met people that boast of an illustrious background. Someone was a rabbi, someone was a prominent philanthropist, someone was a community leader. But if it doesn't go any further, and it ends with the person relating it, to a certain extent, the person who's the forebearer dies permanently. But if this person who tells the story actually lives it as well, even if it's in a smaller way, and then brings children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren into the world where this legacy is continued, that person to a very great extent is still living. Let me give a parable. Okay? A made-up parable. The Tsar of Russia once wanted to have a railroad track laid across a very deep ravine. As it stood in the present, it was basically a lot of potential to connect the two places through a railroad, but the way it stood until the railroad is that one place was wealthy, the other place was impoverished, and if they could just link the two through the railroad, the empire would get stronger and that particular province would grow. So he looked for the finest engineer and told him, money is no object. As much money as you need and as much manpower as you need, I am hiring you for this job. When you succeed in this job, you will be promoted to an illustrious position in the country. You'll never have to worry about anything financially or even in terms of safety. You will be under my personal protection. Well, this engineer was very excited, surveyed the land, realized that it was an incredibly difficult feat. But because the royal coffers were open, he spent hundreds of thousands of rubles hiring the finest, the best, the bravest. And over the course of many, many years, he began to build this bridge. Many lives were lost, and much heartbreak was created. But he persevered until at the end of 6 years, a magnificent bridge was created. The Tsar was notified, came with all of his entourage, and came with medals to be bestowed upon the engineer, and the engineer had to prove that the bridge would actually be strong. So, of course, after the locomotive goes over the bridge, it has to go into a siding or a landing, and over there they would unload and load the cars. The bridge was large enough to hold 30 cars of coal. Now, the average locomotive only had maybe 5 or 6 of them. But to prove the strength of the bridge, they decided to do the maximum. So the Tsar is watching. The locomotive is chugging, belching out smoke, a lot of noise, and there's a long length of cars. The first cars are very heavy. They're filled with coal. But the last ones were just for show, essentially, to show that even 30 cars can go over. They were pretty much empty. And the locomotive goes, and the bridge does not sway. And the first car, and the second car, and the third car, and the fifth car, and the 8th car, the 12th car, and people are beginning to smile. And the king, the emperor, the Tsar, he's looking at the engineer benevolently. But the engineer is not at all comfortable, because the test will be, would it be able to have the weight of all 30? For some time elapses, and when the locomotive is at the end of the bridge and then turning to go into the next landing, for a moment all 30 cars are on the bridge, and spontaneously applause breaks out. A magnificent sight. A colossal weight on the bridge, and the bridge is holding all of them. And then the locomotive continues, and it starts going off, chugging off the bridge, schlepping the first car, the second car, the 8th car, the 12th car, the 20th car, and people are already imagining the celebration that will follow. But the engineer is frightened, because he's looking and he notices that the last car seems to be swaying. And he's praying and hoping and willing that that last car actually goes off the bridge into the siding, and then he will be able to fix what has to be fixed. Well, when car 29 is on the way off the bridge and car 30 is about to follow, because it's coupled, suddenly it goes off its railing. And the people gasp, because now half of the car is off the bridge. And to their horror, the entire car begins to go off the bridge, and car 29 goes with it, which brings 28, which brings 14, all the way to the locomotive. And this horrible accident goes in front of all. It's only a parable. You don't have to shed a tear. But imagine, the last car had the least weight. The last car almost made it. The last car was what was necessary between fame and infamy. But when the last car did not make it, not only did it not reach its destination, it schlepped back. It pulled with it all of the previous cars. My friends, we are the last generation. When I say the last generation, Jews will be forever. But because we are expecting the Messiah to appear at any moment, we are this last generation. And in many ways, we have the lightest load. We don't have the poverty, the crushing poverty. We don't have the horrible anti-Semitism. We don't have the difficult situations of the world at large. What we need is faith and commitment to get to the other side. Well, what happens if, heaven forbid, this generation begins to slide off the siding? It's not only we will not receive the Messiah properly, but all of what our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, all the way from the beginning of creation, what they hoped and what they aspired for, and what they were waiting to see fruition, finally the house will be built. Finally Shabbat will come. Finally the purpose of creation will be fully recognized. All of that goes with this decline and with this fall. Well, together with this responsibility comes also the glory. If we hang in there, and more than just hang in there, if we persevere, if we grow, if we're productive, if we're proactive, if we're happy, if we're joyous, if we're optimistic, if we continue doing what we're doing and we do it better and better, not only will the medal be given to us, but all of the previous generations will turn, face us, me and you, simple people, not Maimonides, not Queen Esther, not Rashi, not this great leader. They will turn around and applaud us and say, thank you for completing the job, because now that you've completed the job, our job is recognized as well. Shalom.